Okay, afternoon, folks. Look, thanks for coming along. I mean, it's getting sunnier out there. There's free drinks outside. There's Wimbledon. Half of you are recovering from Glastonbury. And you've chosen to come to a session on measurement. So, look, massive respect to you all. You obviously care a lot about the future of the industry and the future of your jobs, that kind of thing. So, look, my name's Ian Gibbs. I'm Insight Planning Director at the DMA. This is Tony Miller. He's the chair of the DMA. I'm going to ask Tony to introduce himself properly in a second. If you're not familiar with the DMA, though, we are the Data and Marketing Association. We are the voice of the data-driven marketing industry. We've got members which span agencies, advertising agencies, advertisers, and marketing services providers. We're here to advise on best practice and compliance with all areas of the planning cycle, from planning to delivery to campaign measurements to optimization, all with one eye on privacy regulations. And we're also here to upskill the next generation of marketing talent through our institute, the IDM. And now, frankly, if you like anything that you see today and you want to get your teams upskilled, we've got some lovely subsidised training modules from the DFE, government subsidised training modules from the DFE. So do get in touch with us if you're interested in that sort of thing. We've also got a new chair, Tony Miller. So, Tony, introduce yourself.
Hi, Tony Miller, non-exec chair of the DMA. But before that, I've spent all of my career in marketing. Half of it on the agency side, looking after multiple brands and multiple sectors, and then a good portion of that lately on the client side, 5 years at the Walt Disney Company, managing their digital marketing and CRM across EMEA, and then CMO at Weight Watchers, and doing some consultancy now, and have a new role that starts this week, so another CMO gig. So.
He's done a
Great
bit of
to be
everything,
here.
Tony. Yeah. Look, the reason Tony's here is I'm the insight guy. I've got the data, I've got the charts, but Tony's actually got, like the real experiences of what goes with this. Apparently when George Lucas delivered the script of, Star Wars to Harrison Ford, he looked and said, "You can write this shit, George, but you can't say it." So it's a bit like that with us, I can create all these charts, this insight, but Tony's the one who actually has to do this stuff every day. So that's why he's here. We're here to talk about the value of measurement, right? So this is it's a report that we released 3 weeks ago. You can download it from the DMA website. It's got lots of great coverage so far. We've mined the DMA's effectiveness data bank of 1,500 award-entering campaigns to unpick the value of measurement, to arm marketers, I suppose, with the kind of data they need to defend and grow and build their marketing budgets in these challenging times. So look, a bit of context, a bit of scene setting. If you're about to hit people with lots of charts, the first thing you do to break the ice is show them a cartoon. Thank God for the marketoonists. Look, short-termism is real in our industry, right? Short-termism has been an issue. Pre-COVID, it's got worse during the cost of living crisis. It's got worse during the economic downturn. We are faced with this world where marketers are having more and more pressure on them to deliver those short-term results, to hit those quarterly numbers. And it's fine. All businesses have kind of got to make sure that they can keep their head above the water in the short term, but not when it's done at the expense of long-term growth. I guess the challenge is that, even when marketers do manage to get long-term brand-building budgets signed off, half the time they're not even there to realise the fruits of their endeavours. Apparently CMOs have the shortest tenure in the boardroom at the moment. Not Tony, I hasten to add. So it's a real challenge. And CMOs, they sit on the other side of the boardroom table to cynical-looking CEOs and CFOs. They try and convince them that marketing is an investment. It's not a cost. It should be regarded the same as technological infrastructure investment. But at the same time, their budgets are being chomped away at, and they're being asked to do more with less. The challenge is that all this pressure to deliver short-term results, but actually performance marketing effectiveness is declining, right? And so we see this from the DMA's data bank. I'll explain a little bit more how we get to these numbers in a second. But what we're looking at here is the number of effects per campaign. This is like our proxy measure of effectiveness in our data bank. In 2020, so we're looking at the numbers on the left-hand side to begin with. In 2020, there was a nice sort of effectiveness boost for performance marketing. Everyone was locked down at home. They had nothing better to do than respond to advertising. Since then, performance marketing effectiveness has declined, okay? So it's not saying it's not effective. It's still generating positive results, just not as many as 4 years ago. You'll notice the brand effectiveness has improved. So actually, those who are investing in brand building are seeing more brand effects than they were a few years ago. I wouldn't get totally excited yet. I mean, Walk still suggests that the majority of ad spend is performance-related. But that said, those who are investing in brand are doing it better than before. And after a few years of decline in business effects, so this is the stuff the boardroom really cares about, profit growth, market share growth, shareholder value, a few years of decline, we've actually seen a bounce back in 2023. And that's possibly a lag effect of that improvement in brand effects suddenly being seen in the long term, but time will tell. Reasons for the decline in performance marketing effectiveness are varied. I think, the economy's got a lot to do with it. It costs consumers something to respond to a performance marketing ad. Doesn't matter how good the offer is, it's going to cost them something. It doesn't necessarily cost a consumer something to respond to a brand ad. Maybe it does in the long term as they pay a price premium, but ultimately the economy has a lot to do with it. There's also a lack of creativity in the performance space, which we're going to release a paper on later this year. But the big one is there's also substandard measurement in the performance marketing space. Now, if we look at the length of campaign, we look at short-term campaigns, which are campaigns which run within the quarter. We've got medium-term campaigns and long-term campaigns. And what we're looking here is a best practice measurement index. Again, I'm going to explain a little bit more about how we build this in a second. But basically, the higher the index, the better these campaigns are at measurement. The more likely they are to avoid focusing on meaningless digital vanity metrics. As you can see, though, it's the short-term campaigns into which many performance marketing campaigns fall, which are under-indexing for best practice measurement. So our contention is you fix measurement and you arrest the decline in performance marketing effectiveness to an extent. So look, question, Tony, first question for you. I think, what's up with all this short-termism? I feel like we've been talking about this stuff for years, but we're still obsessed with short-termism.
Exactly. I think it's been a conversation that's been around for a while, but I think it's been punctuated by the world that we live in. I think it's no surprise to anyone in this room what's going on out there in terms of cost of living crisis, inflation issues, focus on government and changes there, world crisis. Everything is happening all around us, and I think we are actually, as marketers, asked to do more with less. There's a lot of cuts and a lot of focus on we need to just do something for sales in the next week, the next month, the next quarter. And so I think what that has done has made all of us look actually to what can we be doing now instead of looking ahead and saying how are we going to be affecting brand building and business effectiveness, because we have to focus on short-term sales or short-term results. And what that also is doing is turning our attention on metrics that potentially don't matter ultimately to the conversation in the boardroom. They are focused on showing effectiveness through the lens of vanity metrics to show that this campaign is working. I'm getting this many views, this many likes, this many shares, so it must be doing something good. But it's not being correlated to what that good looks like and what good is. So it's like we've just hunkered down and just are focusing on anything and everything.
But this is a funny one, right? Because I feel like, the long and short of it, Field a Minute, this came over a decade ago now, and this really encouraged people to start thinking about that interplay of short and long. But, we still see this short-termism now. Oh, as marketers or practitioners, are we stuck in a bit of an ivory tower? Well, it's the businesses that have to do this stuff day to day.
No, I think it's just that, I think it's also a combination of legacy systems, and we don't have the right measurement tools in place. We potentially don't have the right budget investment to drive scale and real understanding of what is going to work long term. So I think what comes kind of naturally is measuring what's closest to us, and what's closest to us is through that campaign lens, and individual ad hoc campaigns that potentially don't ladder up to the bigger picture.
So let's unpick this a little bit more. This idea of focusing on the metrics that don't matter. So what we've done is we've dived into our effectiveness data bank. It's built on the back of the DMA awards, which are open for entry at the moment. The awards are announced every December. Big, long-running, data-driven marketing industry awards. And we specifically look at the results section of those awards, and we look at how entrants have articulated the success of their campaigns. And it allows us to make a judgment, have a view on how people are measuring effectiveness. Generally, there are 4 buckets of metrics that people refer to. Now, one of the metrics that buckets of metrics are business effects. And this is where people have linked their marketing spend, frankly, to the stuff that the board cares about. And I've given some examples here, but, has your marketing spend shifted the dial on market share, customer penetration, profitability, long-term lifetime value? Again, it sort of transcends the marketing department. It's the reason the business exists. People also articulate success using brand metrics. Of course, that's the preserve of brand campaigns, consideration, purchase intent, awareness. you know, the kind of stuff which stimulates future demand and creates emotional connections with brands and consumers. We've got direct response effects, which is obviously the stuff that performance marketing campaigns are tasked with. You know, acquisitions, bookings, footfall, sales in the short term. And the fourth group of metrics we call campaign delivery effects. And really, these aren't effects at all. They're things like reach and frequency and video plays and views and clicks and likes and shares. Digital vanity metrics are in there. And, you know, I think, frankly, we would say these aren't necessarily measures of outcomes at all. We simply included them because people have used them in their results section to articulate success. And I'm not saying these metrics aren't important. Like reach and frequency, they're the cornerstone of, you know, big above-the-line brand campaign planning. You know, if you're trying to assess video plays or clicks or email opens, you know, you need to audit and make sure that you got what you paid for. But, of course, as measures of outcomes, stuff that the board cares about, they don't care about this stuff. They don't care you've got 5 million video plays. They want to know what impact that has had on your business's bottom line. Now, there are a whopping 189 different metrics we've identified in our data bank. So, again, if you're trying to have a joined up and consistent and coherent conversation about measurement, kind of hard to do with so many metrics on the table. I'm hoping there's just like one extra next year so we can round up to a nice 190. In terms of how those 189 split out, though, across those four groups, as you can see, overwhelmingly, like the largest group are those less meaningful campaign effects, right? So 8% business, 20% of those metrics are brand, 31% response, and the largest group are the less meaningful stuff. So we're placing far too much effort on the metrics that don't really tell us much at all. Now, I've talked about this stuff for a few years. You know, Tony and I go out and talk about this stuff, and, you know, it's been a personal crusade. I want to reduce that 41%. I have to say, that's a 2022 number. Resounding success this year. We've reduced it to 39%. Okay, so there wasn't much of a shift. There's still far too much focus on the metrics that don't really matter. You know, I guess what we need to do, though, is really unpick this kind of hypothesis that actually this is inhibiting effectiveness by focusing on the wrong stuff. If we compare campaigns in our data bank that completely avoid using those campaign delivery and digital vanity metrics, if we compare them to those that do, we tend to see there is a big difference in effectiveness. In fact, there is a 67% uplift in business effects for those campaigns which completely avoid focusing on the less meaningful stuff, those campaign delivery effects. So, you know, first value of measurement figure, that's it, 67% uplift. Now, of course, you might say, well, it's a bit tail wags dog, isn't it? You know, if you've unearthed some meaningful business effects, why on earth would I litter my awards entry with clicks and likes and shares and that kind of thing? Which, you know, is a fair point, but I do think there is more going on here. Frankly, if you've invested in the type of measurement that's unearthed business effects, then, you know, it's much more likely you have a culture of measurement, a culture of effectiveness. It's much more likely that you're going to be optimizing your future campaign spend based on your past learnings. You know, you're optimizing to the metrics that matter. And then conversely, if you're focusing on the wrong metrics, perhaps you're optimizing future spend to the stuff that doesn't matter. Perhaps you're optimizing to clicks, likes, and shares, and that's why you're seeing a lower number of business effects. So it might be a little bit tail wags dog, but I do think that if people are avoiding using these metrics, it says something about the culture of effectiveness and measurement and has this positive impact on business effects overall. But Tony, I think my question for you now, like, why are people focusing on the meaningless metrics? Is it our fault? Is it the platform's fault? I mean...
Well, first of all, I mean, they're not all meaningless. I mean, that's one thing I want to get across. There's still important metrics that actually ladder up to a bigger whole. I think what we're saying is the focus is just on those metrics that are showcasing campaign success. And the correlation between campaign success related to business and brand effects isn't being made.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with that, we'll come on to later, but I think, so again, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. We focus on what we know does well in our own domain and what's easier potentially to kind of bring to the table of showing true value of effort.
Yeah.
And there is a success in value of effort, but actually the problem here is we're not connecting that value to the ultimate value of brand and business measurements.
Yeah, fair enough. So actually, you know, probably been a bit down on them. There's still value in
it's
them.
mean. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think
your fault.
If that is the case, though, and you know, we are encouraging people to focus on the effects that matter. How should they do that? Well, I have to say, only 10% of our award entrants give us a methodology that they've used to measure outcomes. So if you're going to enter your DMA awards this year, please tell us how you've measured your campaigns. The rest of them, well, they might have used one of these methods, or they might just be being spoon-fed their results from the platforms, or they might just be focusing on clicks, likes, and shares. We do know that of those which have told us about the methodology they've used, that attribution's most commonly used, then brand tracking, and then MMM. And we also know that for those who quote one of these measurement methods, there is a 42% uplift in the number of effects that they record. And again, a little bit tail wags dog, but it also says something about the culture of effectiveness and measurement with which they subscribe and optimize future spend. Got some really nice blindingly obvious charts now. These are campaigns which use multi-touch attribution. They're in purple, and the average campaigns are in green. Surprise, surprise, the campaigns which use attribution modeling record more performance marketing effects. That's where you use MTA. Third-party cookie attribution is obviously on its way out as third-party cookies die. But if you've got rich first-party data, it's as powerful as ever. Surprise, surprise, those invested in brand tracking record more brand effects, another blindingly obvious effect, but it's a nice sense check. I think there's a few issues with using a brand tracker, though, to measure brand outcomes. Has consideration for your ice cream brand gone up in the summer because, your marketing spend or because it's summer? So I would say use your test and control methodologies. Your brand lift study is really important to use as well. MMM, those who use MMM tend to see large uplifts in brand effects, but also business effects as well. The stuff the boardroom really cares about. Brand, shareholder value, ROI, that kind of thing. And look, this is just a nice little sense check. And we've been saying to people, if you're new to your measurement journey, plot out your 3 to 5 year measurement journey and try and look at which measurement methodologies make most sense to you and when. Imagine you're a startup or you're introducing an existing product or service into a new category. Year 1, it's all about your performance marketing, mopping up the low-hanging fruit, and you're probably going to be using attribution models to measure it, or at least some incrementality testing. Year 2, you invest in brand. You're trying to stimulate future demand, grow the size of the pool. Then you invest in your brand tracker, and you can see that uplift in brand effects accordingly. Year 3, or at least at the end of year 3, you've suddenly got enough back data to build yourself an MMM model, and you can see the uplift in business effects accordingly. So take a long-term view about your measurement journey. Tony, my final question for you is how do we put all these different measurement strands together? Break down the silos, measurement frameworks. I mean, it's tricky. There's a lot to do, a lot to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, it takes more than just the marketer and the marketing team to kind of actually bring it all together. It has to be a collective conversation with all departments. So marketing potentially needs to spearhead that because they're the ones that are trying to show value of the budget that they're spending. But I think it needs to be in sync with the finance team, operations team, technology, your data science, all of the above together working on a solution that's going to be right for the business. So, there's phases that we kind of put on the previous screen, but it all comes down to skill set, budget, appetite, how fast you can move, how you can do a cultural shift internally to bring those together, ensuring that you actually have funding for it, because I think it needs to be set apart from your marketing spend. It needs to be looked at as an investment to the business,
right.
And get buy-in from that so that you can start talking a consistent language amongst finance, marketing, data, technology, to the business, because if you all come together with one voice, the executive leadership team is going to listen.
So that's it, right? So marketing shouldn't just be the responsibility of the entire business, right?
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be just marking your own homework as well. Get everyone involved.
Well, and it's actually making focus on the consumer in this too. It's like the customer needs to be at the center of this, and actually our role is to champion the customer. And if that is first and foremost, with the ring fence of the conversation around with all the departments, I think you'll have a better outcome to put a proper measurement framework in place.
Absolutely. Right, so I think we're out of time, guys. But look, thanks so much for your time. So look, the value of measurement. There is a significant uplift for those who avoid focusing on digital vanity metrics. There's a significant uplift in effectiveness for those who invest in best practice measurements. And I think all these are going to be absolutely vital if we're to arrest this decline in performance marketing that we've seen. Download the paper from our website. Thanks very much for your time, guys.